Welcome to Spirits in the Theater. I'm your host, Mike Mayashiro, and today we're going to talk about Seven. Seven with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt and Kevin Spacey. You guys, this movie, before we get into it, first of all, I just need to tell you, it's rated R for a reason, obviously. This movie is dark. There were some graphic moments that I was like, oh, and I had to look away a couple times. So I'm not endorsing this movie. I'm not recommending you go see it. This is a dark, twisted, psychological thriller, which is one of my favorite genres. I don't love crime and murder and stuff, but I love thrillers. Specifically in groups of people. Like, I love people going through that journey together and having to survive it together. It's a super fun dynamic. Anyway, the darkness, the nastiness aside, the storytelling in this movie was so good. The way they paced the film, you can tell it was done, I guess in the 90s. The pace of the film was so much slower. I actually watched a movie from 1984 last week, and you can tell, our attention spans have gotten so much shorter now. The pace of films today are just so fast-paced compared to what they used to be like. Movie makers used to take their time. They used to methodically and intentionally build a scene, get into it, build a character, build a world, build a story. And Seven was definitely doing that. And the thing is, the slow pace, I'm not always a fan of. Like Unbreakable, I love that movie. It's so slow. The pace is so slow. But I think it actually propels the story. The same is true in Seven. It's a slow-paced film. The character development, though, the buy-in of these characters is so well done, the way they weave them together. And then obviously there's a climactic ending at the end that you're just like a surprise twist. And you're like, no! So one of the things I loved about this film was how intentional the film, and I don't usually pay attention that much to the way a film is made, like the production and the camera angles and the way they're shooting it, but that definitely spoke to me. I was very impressed and really grateful for it. I felt so compelled to want to keep going. Even though it was slow, I needed to know what was going to happen. They did such a great job, giving you enough to want to keep going, but still concealing so much of what you wanted to understand about the characters, about what was going to happen, where this was going. Morgan Freeman as the protagonist, I was kind of bummed out. His character was so depressing, and I was like, what's his deal? And then kind of just learning more about his journey and whatever, I didn't super enjoy his character as much, although obviously he was essential to the story. Brad Pitt, however, was an interesting a flair to it that I really enjoyed. I love seeing their contrast, the way you watch them immediately not get along and then they get to work out their differences throughout the story. I loved watching that play out. It felt very believable. The actors did such a great job, but I really enjoyed Brad Pitt's loud, obnoxious, aggressive, young, youthful zeal. There's action, but it's not like your traditional action movie, and you don't know what's going to happen. I really enjoyed the anticipation that they built throughout the story of what was going to happen next, slowly figuring out what was going on here. Oh, these murders were connected, and then you don't even meet the villain until the last third of the film, which is crazy. Usually you meet the villain pretty early on. You kind of see that thing build up. You kind of just see his clues and things he's left behind and the results of his warpath, and then probably legitimately two-thirds of the way into the movie, you finally meet the guy. And you're like, oh, and you watch them kind of work out, what do they do with this? How do they move forward? It's unnerving, his attitude, and just, they do such a great job helping you experience a depth of meaning and exchanges without over-delivering and spilling the beans and just laying it all out for you. You have to be intentional and paying attention in this movie to really appreciate it and get it. But I felt very rewarded as a viewer, as an audience member, because I felt respected. They were giving me just enough to have it, to be able to piece it together, but I still needed to pay attention to really get it. Now, keep in mind, this movie is revolving around the 7 deadly sins. And so this murderer is killing people according to their engagement with those types of sins. And so it gets kind of graphic. There's a moment where this person is laying on the bed. I think they were killed for the sloth sin. And they'd been pinned, chained to the bed for months or something. And they were a corpse, basically. And then at the end of the scene, that person moves and you freak out because you thought this person was dead, and they spent some time in the room with them for a while, and then all of a sudden they're alive and you freak out. That scared me a lot. I was not expecting it, because this movie feels very realistic, right? So for that person to still be alive felt very far-fetched. It was crazy, and you're like, ah. And then seeing Gwyneth Paltrow's in this movie as well. Seeing her character play into it, and just her intentionality, getting to explore her journey and experience was like an interesting twist. You're like, why is she coming in? I don't get what her role is in this story. Why is she being introduced, and why is she still like playing a part? And then you get it at the end. You guys, I'm not going to tell you how it ends. I'm going to let you like, maybe I should tell you because I'm not trying to get you to watch this movie. But one thing I do want to say, and as far as the spirit of the thing is concerned, the content of this movie is heavy and gross. Like there is an exploration of like the sadistic mind of a serial killer and like what they were doing with their victims. Like that's gross. I don't want to celebrate that. I don't feel good about it. But again, like I would say similarly to what I experienced with it in a different way, the villain and the good guys were very much separate and obvious from the get-go, and there was never at any point an appealing factor for the villain. We were there. The storyteller was never trying to get us to like the bad guy or to be on his team or identify with him, or like that was never a thing. He was only upsetting, only creepy, only like villainous. And then the good guys, obviously having their grit and their struggles and their personal journey, both having pretty like a difficult go at life, but genuinely fighting for and contending for justice and for truth and for, the light to win out in this. And so to watch them struggle and work together and like have to work out their differences to push against this tide of darkness, I really appreciated those lines being nice and clear and clean and not crossed. I think I mentioned before, I hate it when storytellers like twist the villain and make him more appealing or relatable or like, prop him up as something to be like celebrated or like want to be like. That wasn't happening here. So it felt actually pretty pure in that sense. At the end of the movie, I felt somewhat heavy. I didn't feel heavy like I would like after a movie theater experience, and I watched this at my house. But I did feel a little unsettled, a little shocked, like the roller coaster ride was a little alarming. It ended in a way that I was not expecting, and it was like super upsetting. And it was really well done. Like the way the story was told and what they did, it was a really good ride. If you imagine like going on a roller coaster, there are parts of the roller coaster you don't like because it scares you, but at the end of the experience, like that was a full experience. I really enjoyed what they put together as a whole package. I felt that way about this movie. It didn't end happy and positive, so that's another factor there. Like I don't love when hope isn't the message. I think there was enough there for me to say yes, but there was still a heaviness at the end. By and large, at the end of the movie, though, I have to say I enjoyed it as a film. I'm not saying I think this is a great movie people should watch, but I think the way they made it and the story they told, I think they did a really good job, and it was an interesting story. And remember, guys, when you're watching a movie, you're never alone. Like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that bell button so you can get notifications of our next video. Have you guys seen Seven? Do you have any thoughts? Want to put them down below? What is your take on horror or horror, like the thriller genre in general? Would love to know your thoughts, especially as a Christian watching this stuff. How does it hit you? Would love to know your comments below.